literature from specific eras. Here's a guide to the various eras of martial law, literature before 1965. Marcos became president in December of 1965. There's a lot of literature available documents from that period that you can do research about because of the things that happened during that period that are still relevant to things that happened after. A lot of the time when we talk about martial law, we're only talking about what happened after 1972. But the truth is the patterns that played out on September 23, 1972, and onwards, these patterns were laid out in the decades prior. For example, the socio-economic conditions that the country faced from 1946 upwards, the warriors, which when you talk about human rights violations in the 70s, we can't forget that a lot of that arises from the cruelty that was experienced by the population during the Japanese occupation in World War II. So a lot of the human rights violations techniques during that time were, they didn't come out of the blue. They came out of the historical context of the war and the post-war struggles that came after that. There's also stuff that's written about the legislature years of Ferdinand Marcos, what he did in the Senate, and what he was up to during that time. That record wasn't the cleanest, by the way. We don't, you might get the impression that Marcos went wrong only in 1972. That is not the case. That he only went wrong in 1965 when he became president. That is not the case. There are things that happened during the legislature years that show that things were going to happen later because the signs were there. The signs were there already during the legislature years, these years in the Congress and in the Senate. And then there's the narratives about the early campaigns and what Marcos said and what Marcos promised and how he portrayed himself, the machismo that he surrounded himself with, and so on and so forth. There's literature also available out there. You just have to find it about the first term and the priorities of the first term. The problem with looking at literature from this period is that a lot of it is very pro-government in its stance. So you're going to have to observe that literature or read that literature very critically. There's also that interesting period between January in 1972 to January of 1970 to September of 1972, which was the first quarter storm to the declaration of martial law. That was, the social volcano beginning to explode, and seeing protests all over. The picture on the screen right now is of the Diliman Commune of 1971. The Metro Manila bombings took place during this period. There's documentation in the old newspapers about that. And a lot of the literature from these early years is primary. It's news reports, it's documents, it's memoirs. There's the challenge of making secondary literature so that we can make more critical sense of the events that happened during this period. That's going to be important to do. During the martial law years, there are accounts of what happened in the various sectors, what happened among the students, what happened among the lawyers, what happened among the, there's an interesting lack of coverage of the history of uh, disagreement with the Marcos administration in the armed forces of the Philippines during this period. Don't get the impression that there was no resistance. There was very little resistance, and there was muted resistance, but nonetheless there was. And it's an interesting story to tell. There are geographical and local stories, meaning what happened during martial law in Pampanga, what happened in martial law in Zambales and Bataan, and so on. Local history is very important. There's cultural narratives of the martial law. So what happened to our culture and how did pop culture change? Uh, it changed the way that we write songs, by the way. Martial law changed the way that we write songs and the way that we experience music. How so? I don't have time to explore here, but that would be an interesting thing to write about if you are fond of writing cultural histories. And of course, there are the various, ways that we explore issues that happened during these times. There are books out there about the economy, about the construction of the dams, about the construction of the Bataan nuclear power plant, about the nature of technocracy during the martial law era. And it's good that we have these, but when you see a book about a particular aspect of this era, it tends to be small print size books, maybe 2,000, 3,000 books published. So when you see those, buy them already because they're going to disappear off the shelves really easily. And of course, if you're into scholarships and if you're an academic, that's an interesting aspect of martial law to write. There are interesting aspects of martial law to write about. There's the material that was produced by the cult of personality of Ferdinand Marcos, meaning to say the major propaganda effort to make Marcos look like this very important hero. There were books that were supposedly written by Marcos himself, but were actually ghostwritten by a journalist from that period, which explains his point of view. Marcos even came up with a diary that interprets history based on his point of view, and a scholar actually went and published this diary, including commentaries on which was Marcos, which aspects of those diary are Marcos just lying about events and reinterpreting events to make him look good in terms of historical, in terms of the historical narrative. And again, there are textbooks about this era, not all of which have a narrative about martial law, and not all of which are particularly accurate. There's a lot of there has been a lot of literature written about EDSA, um, and yet strangely there isn't enough. Partly because a lot of the literature about EDSA is in memoir form. So primary literature siya, there hasn't been that much in terms of analysis of what things happened during that time and how things how things evolved, and how that effort became successful in that particular moment, and how it was influenced by the movements that started happening as early as 1970, 16 years prior, and after martial law, 14 years prior, and so on and so forth. And then there are a lot of books written, especially by UP Press and Ateneo Press and the other academic presses, about how the post-EDSA governments shaped events, and changed the way our nation moved forward as a result of patterns pushed forward by martial law. Um, yeah, so there's actually a lot of that already. So perhaps it would be more interesting to write about the era prior to martial law if you were looking to write something new. There's also there isn't enough literature about the fact that the Marcoses came back. It's going to be interesting because this is just happening in front of our eyes. It's going to be an interesting history to tell about how the Marcoses came back to power, and why they were able to come back to power, and how we can undo undo all of this in the long term, if we can. And then there isn't that much written yet about the long-term impacts of martial law, again because it's still playing out. Paths forward in terms of the development of literature on martial law. We need more documentation and validation. Of course, in terms of primary literature, capturing the accounts of people who actually went through the experience. Yeah, I talked about a lot of those things already. In terms of secondary literature, these books that analyze the era, there's not enough scholarly work being done about the martial law era. There's a lot of okay, let me correct that. There's a lot of scholarly work that isn't published about that era. And the challenge perhaps is in making sure that this material is made more broadly available, and that goes through the scientific consensus process, historical science and the historical consensus about what really happened, so that we can finally come to agreements about what what patterns actually were significant, and what events were actually significant during that period. That's the job of secondary literature. At this point, we have a lot of primary literature. We have a lot of accounts of, okay, this is what actually happened, but we don't have enough publicly available analysis that will tell us, okay, this was important. The 1974 Sacred Heart retreat um, raid in 1974 was important because it awakened a certain aspect of the population, whereas the Latandenya rally in I don't remember what year that was, is significant because it awakened this particular this particular aspect of society, and that eventually brought impact on 1970, the later 1970s, and eventually EDSA, and so on and so forth. Ayun. And it's also important that these books be integrated into the curriculum, which, as Ma'am Tina talked about earlier, this is not yet happening very effectively. Tertiary literature, coverage of martial law in encyclopedias. This will happen as long as the primary and second literature becomes available. So I'm not going to talk about this as much, because you're going to go past it. There's a lot of interesting things happening in terms of creative literature, but since I'm not I'm not as active in the creation of creative literature right now, I'm not going to talk about this much right now. I do want to get involved more in the future, but I'm not particularly the expert right now. The last few weeks actually, introduce a new set of threats for coverage of martial law, because of the rise, not only locally but internationally, of an authoritarian tendency, and a tendency towards you know alternative truths, is what we're referring to. I know that Trump is not necessarily directly interested in Philippine history, but the fact that he has such a large pulpit, and that he uses it to um, you know question historical narratives and democratic prerogatives, presents a danger to the telling of martial law history, because there's a lot of uh, this, in a lot of ways, buffers up the techniques of negationism that we discussed earlier. It introduces trivialization, it normalizes condonation, and all of these things. Other challenges that we have during this era, we have the rise of platform culture, and the fact that we don't really have a single overarching narrative that everyone is familiar with anymore. That is a difficulty. It's going to be difficult to share about this, the fundamental or essential truths of the martial law era. The Marcoses' return to power presents a threat, obviously, because they're in power, they have some control over the narrative, and of course, we don't know what else they will do in the future. Not necessarily only in this term, but in future terms. We know they want to stay in power, right? We don't know what they'll do in future terms. There's global democratic decline, as I described. It's a problem. There's a rightward shift. You know, I have a lot of jokes about democratic decline, which I will not tell here because we're already running out of time. I was hoping to tell a lot of dad jokes about that, but okay, never mind. And then there's the shift. We're also in this point in our history where we have to talk about the shift from collecting primary literature to creating more secondary literature. uh, because we're running out of sources of the primary literature. Uh, and as that generation that is capable of writing primary literature about martial law is, we're getting there. We need to figure out a new generation of books about martial law and a new approach to telling the story of martial law by the people who came after, who didn't necessarily experience martial law per se. Ayun. And yeah, that's my review of martial law literature. I know it was very meta, but I hope it was of some use. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was truly an insightful and powerful discussion. Thank you so much, Prof, for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. Your talk has given us deeper understanding of the challenges and responsibilities we all share in keeping historical records alive.
Exactly, partners. Sabi nga nila, history is not just about remembering, it's about making sure the lessons of the past remain available for future generations. We all have a role in the play in keeping these stories alive and making sure that the truth is never forgotten.
With that, we hope everyone takes this discussion to heart and reflects on the importance of upholding historical integrity. But huwag muna kayong aalis sa seats nyo, guys. Because we now open the floor for our Q&A session, where you'll have the chance to ask our speakers your burning questions.
Yes, again, thank you so much, Ms. Christina Pibawagan, for being here with us today. And of course, thank you to our very own professor, Professor Remy E. De Leon. And it's a privilege to have you share your expertise and engage with us today.
Now, we will allot 25 minutes for our Q&A session. The audience may now ask questions, and you may ask in the chat box or raise your hand to speak. Actually, partner, meron pang kanina pa nagtatanong dito sa chat box natin. Okay lang ba kung ako na yung magbabasa? So here, ang sabi ni Mr. Sapio, I was wondering po, do you know if there are any texts that cover local history specifically? This question is for Ms. Bawagan.
You're asking if there are available materials for local histories? Hello?
Yes po, I believe Mr. Sabio is asking about that.
Well, I'm not that I'm not that knowledgeable on local histories and their availability, but I'm sure there are. I know there are. I'd like to add though that one good source also for the martial law period would be Project Gunita, and it has a Facebook page. Carl Suyat is only 23 or 24 years old, but this is his passion. So he's really into it, and he's gathering a lot of primary sources about the period. So if you'd like to check it out, it's on Facebook. I'll type it here, huh? Project. Oops. Gunita. But I'm sorry, I wasn't able to answer the question as to the accessibility of local histories. I know there are, I don't know where you can find them.
I also am not sure where specific local histories are, but I do know that local histories in terms of individual histories are available. So the biographies that we have of people who went through martial law are by definition also local histories. So unfortunately that they don't tell complete local histories. So for example, when we talk about martial law history and we talk about Pampanga, we will learn about the various bantayog na mga bantayog honorees who are from Pampanga. Also, we will learn that there are a lot of mentions of Clark and Subic in the narratives in the Bantayog ng mga Bayani because these were major issues at the time. So there's local history information available, but not in the form as much of local histories. Um, yeah, I think that's the Baguio is the only place I know. Oh, Davao and Baguio are the places that I know that have a relatively well-established narrative of what happened during martial law. Well, in Baguio's case, it was EDSA. Uh, in Davao's case, it was the protests. It was the protests after the death of Ninoy, and also the various things that happened in, in the barangays, during the violent, encounters of that period. So there is a history of that is written down because of the accounts of Mindanao journalists. So medyo weak pa yung historical narratives of locals per se, but if you dig through biographies, you will find these local histories.
The story of the Sacadas also in Negros. I think if you just check it out, you will see a lot about them, no? Sacadas of Negros. And in the north, if you read about Macleing Dulag and the Chico River Dam, which he won, no? He won, by the way, although he was killed. But it's a very historic event. That case, the women were also very active in the struggle against the Chico River Dam project. Have you viewed 11103 already? Has this class viewed it? Not yet. Yun, that's very, very rich, especially with regard to the massacres in Samar and in the Palimbang massacre in Sultan Kudarat. Yun, local history yun. Very, very rich on that. And they have a lot of primary sources there. You can also search for it online. Merong mga videos, merong literature online. I would like to ask Miss Malyari, ako yung nag-interview. Miss Malyari, do you have any relative who studied in Philippine Science High School?
Good evening po, Miss Bawagan. I don't have any relatives po who studied Philippine Science.
All right. Graduate na eh. Pero kahawig mo kasi, so akala ko ano ka, pamangkin or something. Sige, thank you.
Thank you for that answer po, Ms. Bawagan and Prof. Meron po ring tanong dito si Ms. Castillao. Sabi niya, I agree about the danger of oversimplification due to sentimentality. It seems to me that a lot of Filipino discourse, including textbooks and school, of course, but also television and even FB and YouTube, have a sentimentalist and didactic tone rather than critical tone. So everything flattened into a simplistic, shortened, preachy version of history. Do you think this is getting in the way of telling the story of martial law, which of course involves understanding a lot of perspectives? Or, given the quality of Philippine education, can we even avoid this? Will we just have to work around it?
As I mentioned earlier, the fact based on the textbooks already used is that the bigger issue is the lack of data presented, primarily with regard to the economic crisis. So there, binanggit din na may actually lack ng data, which would be the very essence of basis of understanding deeply what happened during that period. Yung medyo nagiging sentimental or emotional, there is some mention about that, but that wasn't the primary thing. It was also mentioned that the authors tended to distance themselves whenever they would have to bring out the negative aspects of martial law. I guess it's also partly due to the fear of red tagging or losing their jobs, or I don't really know, no. But there were one or two books which were relatively good. And see, I was able to see the fine print, no. They were compared to the rest better in their treatment of history and more honest. Wala masyadong takot, no, dun sa paglalabas ng katotohanan. So yung sinabi nga dun sa isang page, ang very saddening is the fact that although it mentioned that the economy was not good, not all, no, just a few books, it did not substantiate that with enough data. Because if students had learned all of this prior, no, even with all the social media disinformation, kung equipped ang mga students with the data, madali nilang labanan yun eh. Hindi nila agad-agad paniniwalaan. The thing is that even you yourselves mentioned that you don't recall discussing martial law. I'm just curious, because two of you mentioned that, I'm just curious how many in this class had that experience, that in your high school or grade school, you hardly discussed martial law or understood the deeper meaning of martial law. Ako naman nag-interview sa inyo. Maybe we could have a raise of hands, whoever are here. How will I be able to see? I'm just curious eh. It's additional data to our study eh. How can I see all of you? Paano ba yan?
Ayan, I think super dami pa nang nag-raise ng hand. So, yeah.
Ayan. So, can you tell me more or less the numbers? Kasi hindi ko kayo lahat makita eh. Hindi ako techie. Paano nga ba to?
There are 10 po na nag-raise ng hand.
10 you are saying that it was just a timeline, no profound discussion. Is that what you're saying? Okay, can we have a raise of hands of those who were able to discuss it more profoundly in their grade school or high school? So we have 2. Kasama si Professor De Leon. So we have only 1.
Lowered
Ganun
hand.
ba?
Lowered hand.
Lowered na. So si Arian lang. Is that true, Arian? You were able to discuss it very well in your class? High school or elementary? Ay, she put down her hand na. Baka pag-reciting. So wala. No one was really able to discuss it in their high school and elementary? Oh. Can I ask, sorry ha, I'm really curious. Can I ask how many of you studied in public schools for high school, elementary? Six, 7, 8. So majority. Majority. Okay. So ilan na ba tayo? 29 tayo eh, pero konti lang nakikita ko eh. Would you kindly tell me the number, mga nag-aral sa public schools? Mga ilan?
Around 12 po. 18, 12.
12. And then the rest, I assume that the rest studied in private schools. Pero kahit the private schools, hindi pa rin malalim yung pagtalakay sa martial law. Ganun ba yun? Oh, sige. Sige. So we have a lot of tasks ahead, no? Kasi talagang pathetic yung naging kalagayan ng bansa natin in the realm of education about that period.
That's true po, no, ma'am. And very, very nakakasad lang po na ganun po yung nangyayari. Na hindi po namin natututunan yung mga kailangan namin matutunan sa school kasi very limited lang po yung tinuturo sa amin. Moving forward po, meron po another question for Prof. Remy. Sabi ni Miss Castillejo po, it's great that you brought up creative works. I wonder what stories you're most excited to hear about.
Okay, so first of all, hello, Mai.